Well, I think there are concerns about the language issue. I've heard people talk about and look up to Canada and the problems that have happened with the province of Quebec and Quebec trying to get out of Canada by virtue of the fact that there's a language barrier there. So I think people have that concern, but it is ironic that Puerto Rico has two languages, two official languages, and the United States has no official language. There's no official language for the country. But I think if you look at Capitol Hill, I think a lot of members voted for this, and they in good faith, want the Puerto Rican people to have self-determination, have a vote. But I don't think they thought out this legislation because although their sentiments and their hearts are in the right place, this was not the right answer. The way that this legislation was drafted and has been amended still isn't the right answer because it's confusing. One of the choices is extraordinarily confusing, and you may have a situation where you have just a simple majority or even a plurality that votes for statehood. That's not a mandate, and that's not going to send a message to Washington, D.C. that, hey, we want to be a state. I think if the plebiscite came out with statehood being 80%, 75%, it'd be hard for Congress to say no, but I just don't see that happening, especially considering that Puerto Rico's rejected this idea 3 times already.
Governor Thornburgh, as a practical matter, knitting Puerto Rico to the United States, it's very close on some ways and still quite separate in others, be a simple matter? Or would it take a long time, even if everybody agreed on statehood?
Well, recognize this is not the first time that the United States has absorbed a territory as a state where English is not the predominant language. It happened in Louisiana, it happened in California, happened in New Mexico. And over the years, those accommodations have been made, and those cultural differences have become part of the warp and the woof of the state and increased its value. So I think that's really kind of a red herring argument, the notion that Puerto Rico has a dual language system within which they operate. And I would not want to think that the people of the United States or the Congress of the United States would decide upon the suitability of providing the people of Puerto Rico with the choices to their form of government strictly on the basis of what language they spoke. We haven't done that in the past. We wouldn't necessarily do that now, I don't think.
But Puerto Ricans are afraid for the future of their language if they join the Union, just as if they would lose their Olympic team and symbols of their separate sense of nationhood. There is some fear about the Spanish language.
Yeah, in some quarters there is, but I think the U.S. is evolving. This nation is becoming ever more so a multicultural nation. It is a nation of immigrants, and you have areas like southern Florida, southern Texas, southern California, where Spanish is spoken all over the place, and people are very proud of their heritage. In Puerto Rico, we'll always be a Caribbean island. That's not going to change. We'll always pray in Spanish at home, and Spanish will always be there, regardless of whether you impose it by law or not. My point with the language issue and the potential of Puerto Rico joining the Union is that whatever applies in the mainland should apply in Puerto Rico. Nothing more, nothing less. If you want to become a state, it has to be equal footing. But don't impose on Puerto Rico something you're not imposing elsewhere. If there's no official language in this country as such, either by the Constitution or by federal law, then you shouldn't be imposing in Puerto Rico. The federal government operates in Puerto Rico in English, and if you speak English and you go to the local Puerto Rico government, any agency to get any service, you will get served. They'll deal with you. People speak Spanish and English. I hope our English improves. I hope we can, in fact, enhance the teaching of English in Puerto Rico because it is good for all our children, for everybody, as a matter of opportunity.
Would Spanish remain the medium of instruction in Puerto Rican public schools?
Both languages should be learned because it makes all the sense in the world to do that. I am bilingual. It has helped me so much. My children are bilingual. That's what I wish for all kids in Puerto Rico, and it makes sense for Puerto Rico, and it doesn't affect the U.S. Mainland or the continental U.S. at all. So that's my take, and I think times are changing. That's why 12 years ago we had a plebiscite. Let's have another, and let's see where the majority ends up being.
Well, Manuel, do you think the previous two guests who've spoken on this issue are glossing over the state of Spanish and English and how much of an issue this is?
I think people live in a bubble. Puerto Rico is not Hawaii. Puerto Rico is not Alaska. They are, the dynamics, the characteristics are much different. There was a Hawaiiization where the native population were replaced with Americans, and the majority living in Hawaii, they were Americans. And only a small population was native Alaskan and native Hawaiian, and we have to see that those populations were against statehood. Now, Puerto Rico is not New Mexico. Puerto Rico is not Louisiana. Puerto Rico is like Dominican Republic, Mexico, Jamaica. That's what is Puerto Rico, okay? So we're losing focus here by trying to compare apple with oranges. And in terms of the language, there was a process in Puerto Rico to assimilate Puerto Ricans to speak English, and the educational system was in English. And that had to be changed because people, number one, they were not learning English, and they were being, the education was not a good education when it was taught in English. And that's why the system has to be changed into the native language. So this whole process of trying now to impose that Puerto Ricans have to foster the English language and have to educate the people in the English language so they can assimilate, it failed in the past. It failed because Spanish is the mother language. And also, if you, for example, let's say Puerto Rico becomes a state. There are people in Puerto Rico that don't speak English. Are those people going to be prevented from running for Congress because they don't speak English? Or Congress is going to provide them an interpreter, so when they go to Congress, they're going to have somebody interpret for them. There are people in the Statehood party that doesn't speak English. Are they going to have the opportunity to run for Congress? Those are questions that have to be answered.
That's a good question. Actually, I had never thought of that. Well, that is a good question. What's the quick answer?
Quick answer is that, of course, they'll need to learn English to be able to work in Congress and represent their people in Congress effectively. You need to read and write to be eligible to be a member of Congress, but I mean, look at Hawaii. Hawaii is a bunch of islands in the middle of the Pacific, so far from this country, and they ended up becoming a state. And Alaska, how about Alaska? So Puerto Rico, we are American citizens to start. To the extent some people there don't know English, they should, and I want them to learn it. And by the way, let me say something. It's not that the system didn't work, it's that the political leadership in Puerto Rico, at the time they changed the way the system was working, politically, for political reasons, said, let's stop teaching so much English down here. That wasn't fair to my people. Our people want to learn English. If you poll our people, they want their children to learn English as well as Spanish, and to play politics with language is not good. It's not the right thing to do.